destruction platformer. You play as a little red destruction worker named Dynamite Anton. You are on a death mission to Hell to kill Satan. Satan has stolen Anton's booze because he's jealous of how much more red Anton is. So, of course, Anton gives chase, and you have to go through 12 massive levels in pursuit of your spirits. You find the spirit, blow a bunch of shit up, and run back to the start of the level before happy hour is over, of course. And that's it.
Excellent. So, the game plays very similar to the Wario Land series. You've probably gotten that question a lot, but we got to get through the standard sim so people understand how this works.
Of course.
So, how many hours of Wario Land do you believe you've sunk into your childhood before developing this game?
Oh my god, I think that's a really good one just because like one of my most formative memories was playing Wario Land 4 in the back of my mom's car, right? And I remember getting into the sound room and just hearing like these awful sounds, like these awful musical tracks, right? Just bizarre ambient shit. And just thinking to myself, damn, why does it sound like this? Like, 'cause I grew up on like Game Boy Color, like all the chiptune stuff. And so when I had a handheld that was making these bizarre sounds, I was like, I don't know, it was really tough to describe, but it kind of felt like my Game Boy was possessed. And so that was a life-altering experience for me, truly. And I have manifested my trauma into creating this game.
Would you say that you tried to emulate the Game Boy Advance's sound one-to-one, or have you done some enhancements? Because personally, with the Game Boy Advance, it does not quite have the sound capabilities as a Super Nintendo. So like if you play Pokemon, it's got a lot of muffled trumpets.
Yeah.
So have you kept it faithful, or have you done something else?
So that's a really fun one, just because at the start of the project, I really did want to emulate GBA, calling it a sound chip, but all that stuff was done in software. I really wanted to try to emulate that faithfully at the start, so that came down to I'm going to use a limited number of tracks, I'm going to downsample the instrument sources. I actually have like a rack of hardware that is accurate to like the original Game Boy, like stuff from like the 90s, 2000s. But what I found was it became increasingly difficult to make music that was like really fun and listenable and kind of, you know, like banger music with those restrictions. And obviously many composers did that, but like it was kind of begrudging, right? And so at some point I kind of just said fuck that and started using you know, those old sounds, but I would use as many tracks as I want. I would use modern mixing and mastering, reverb, and then eventually I started bringing in live guitar because I'm a guitarist as well. So ultimately I think that ended up elevating the soundtrack to a certain degree that I don't think I would have been able to achieve if I had stuck to the retro flavor. Which, I mean, of course I have a lot of respect for that. Antonblast was done that way. People have love for that soundtrack, but I do appreciate this one a bit more.
Awesome. Yeah, so quick aside on that note, how much Guitar Hero have you played?
I'm really bad at Guitar Hero. I remember being a kid and just sucking at it. Everyone's like, you're a guitar player?
Oh, like you play real guitar?
Nah, it's just not the same.
Fair enough. So audio aside, you said that you tried to be very faithful with Anton, so I'm assuming this is more like Shovel Knight where you keep the spirit but you enhance it where you feel you need to?
Yeah. So like our approach generally with this one has kind of been like GBA plus. So we've talked about it at length. We have a very good relationship with the team at Game Maker. So the game is made in Game Maker, but we've kind of hot rodded it a bit where the screen resolution, the way that it's displayed, is kind of, it's drawn at a native pixel resolution. It's upgraded a bit from the Game Boy, which I think was 160 pixels tall, so like our resolution is 384 by 216, widescreen proper, upscales nicely, but you still get those nice square pixels, everything's a perfect pixel grid, and so it ends up looking authentic. But in spite of that, we go much harder. We don't limit our palette so much. I mean, we try to be tasteful about it. We're not using a bunch of random colors and so forth. But, you know, we don't limit ourselves. As I said, it's kind of hot-rodded GBA more than anything.
Yeah, I see that with the screen behind us right now because similar to like Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, they would use like 3 different shades of green for the grass.
Yeah.
And here I'm seeing like you have a red on Annie, a different red for the brick, a different darker red to show background, and then like a lighter red for like faraway objects.
Yep. And I mean, a lot goes into the color theory behind the game. You know, we've had lots and lots and lots of fights about how to best make things clear, and I mean, it's so important how chaotic this game is, right? Particularly when you have like the layer jumping mechanic as well, it's so important to make sure that the background stuff has just as much clarity as the foreground. And so this build here is a little older, but the press build that we've been displaying here has much better color balance as compared to this stuff. You know, so things are much more saturated. You'll have much greater color separation. That kind of thing is just so deeply important to us.
Yeah, that's probably why it could be done on the GBA either, because the Game Boy Advance has a fairly washed out palette.
So it's an interesting thing with that, because you could do any colors that you want, but with the early Game Boy Advance games, because there was no backlight, and you know, we had a much better color range at the time, it made sense to fade the games out just so you would be able to see stuff on the screen. Yeah, but that's why I hate those Donkey Kong Country ports.
Yeah, same. So speaking of shit flying everywhere,
yeah.
I played the demo on Steam, and the screen shake was set to 2 out of 5, and it was still all over the fucking place.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
So how, like, what's the team consensus on chaos here?
I mean, 2 out of 5 is kind of like where I would place, like, you know, like the Doom, please don't hurt me sort of thing, right? That's kind of where I would place that, and that's, you know, that's the easy mode, right? But I just always had a love for options where you could just push them way beyond what any sane human being would select them at. Like, why not, right? If you want to fuck your game up, then you have the right to do so.
That's a great call.
Yep.
Yeah, I play a lot of Dance Dance Revolution, and you can set the arrow speed to like 8 times or 10 times, and it's almost impossible.
Oh, I love that.
Like, sure, you think you're hardcore enough. I would love to see a speedrunner with maximum screen shake trying to get through this.
Oh yeah, I've done a couple of streams where I would play the game like that and just, you know, get people throwing up all over the place, you know? It's a good party trick.
Yeah, just put like a giant, you know, motion sickness warning at the top.
Yep.
So, how long did it take to do all those animations in the game? I noticed that there's a lot of them.
So, for active development on the game, not counting like all the pre-production and all the concepts, because then that's going back nearly 10 years. But as far as active development on the game, that's been about 3 years now. It's been too fucking long. I can't wait to get it out. But everything is very meticulous, you know. Our art team moves quickly, but we make sure stuff is polished and detailed and consistent. That's the way to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like the level of polish that the indie scene seems to require these days.
I have a lot to say about that.
Would you like to?
Well, I think I've talked about this publicly a bit before, but I'm always banging the drum about the fact that it's an indie developer. If you compare it to, like, this has been a hot topic, but if you compare 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what were the great indie games, right? Stuff like Braid, Super Meat Boy, the indie game, the movie stuff, right? Which I have a lot of respect for, and those are fantastic games. But if you look at the quality standard now, or just like the originality standard, or like the outrageous standard, right?
Yeah.
You know, Braid back then compared to now, you know, I mean, look, there's been like the whole hot topic of how well that game sold. How much do people care?
Yeah.
I'm not going to comment on that, but like,
you can literally make Braid in Katakawa's new like game maker thing as
Yeah.
a spin-off of RPG Maker. It looks exactly the same.
right, and like, you know, the problem is that so many banger indie games are coming out every day, right? It's kind of like the indie apocalypse theory. And so, unless you are really going as hard as you possibly can, you're not going to stand out, you know, and I think that was really the big driver, because if you compare against, you know, where the game was at Kickstarter time, right, 2 years ago now, the difference is immense. I'm going off of 1 hour of sleep here. But the difference is immense just by virtue of the fact that it had to be, right? It has to be the absolute best it can be, and I think we're there now, hopefully, but we'll see in November. Maybe I'll be tired of it by then.
Yeah, you'll just snap for the next year. You'll wake up, you'll be a millionaire because you sold.
All right, I'm hoping to be an Anton-millionaire after it's all done.
Yeah. So on that note, though, like trying to build all this up to match the quality that an audience expects. So you have to make the game, and that has to be solid. And then you have to animate it so people think it's appealing. Then you have to be your own lawyer, your own PR guy. How do you build a team in current year?
I mean, it's tough, right? The thing that I always say, I owe my game development career to Crash Bandicoot, right? You know, myself and the other leads on the team, we met on a Crash Bandicoot forum in 2007. Like, and you know, we're all hardcore Crash nerds. Like, that's really where it all came from. And I think I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting a studio with your friends, but it does help when you kind of have an understanding of what pisses you guys off, right? You know, what really ticks you off about one another.
We run an award show with 50 strangers. We have no clue what you mean. None.
Yes, I'm sure.
Oh man. So going back to that though, so you said you've been cooking this idea for like 10 years. You've known these people for a long time.
Yeah.
Like, when did it click for you guys that this was the game you wanted to make?
So we always wanted to make this game. Like, I think for me, I always really loved the Wario Land games. Obviously, I love the Crash games. And I really wanted to make something that kind of tied both of those things together. But it's difficult when, you know, at the time we hadn't shipped a game as a studio. So we got Antonblast made with a publisher for a shoestring budget, and it did okay. It was well received. I have my own thoughts on that game, but it was well received. It sold decently enough, and so we were able to then. This is extremely condensed, but we were then able to convince some people to give us money to make this one, the dream game, right? And so we brought it to Kickstarter. That was how we had announced it. We did a whole bringing it back to you. It's game 2. And somehow announcing the game and the Kickstarter on the same day worked out for us. And that's really where it all began. I think it was, we started active development in November of 2021. So by the time it all wraps, it'll have been 3 years on this one. But we only revealed the game in May of 2022. So that was kind of when we were like, okay, committed. We got to do it now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Too far in at that point.
Yep. Too deep.
Was that also about the time you did the Red Guy trailer? Because that shit's hilarious.
That was the following year. That was kind of like, people were wondering where the hell we were. We had a quiet period, and then I was like, I'm going to don the suit on. That shit is calling to me like the Green Goblin.
How important has it been to keep the humor while making this game?
If I wasn't able to laugh, I would be dead right now. It is, look, game development is stressful. Indie development is extra stressful. I mean, all tiers of development are. But I think the big thing really is that my theory has been that if you have a good sense of humor, then you will make good games, right? Because games are meant to make you laugh, they're meant to be fun, and insofar, that being the driving force has worked out well for us. I can't speak to everyone else, but it has been important for me.
Yeah, because you're smashing shit in the game and not in real life.
Exactly.
It's still very cathartic.
Exactly, absolutely. It's a rage room interactive.
Yeah. So, 2 more for you.
Okay.
All right. So, if you don't already know our audience, they're kind of simple people. If you could describe your game as a food item, what kind of food item would Antonblast be?
Antonblast is a beefy 5-layer burrito.
I like it.
Yep.
All right. And finally for you, sir, people playing the demo today, if you want them to walk away with one thought, you know, after putting the controller down, what is it?
What the fuck did I just play?
Excellent. Anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this?
Buy Antonblast when it comes out on November 12th, Steam and Switch. Make me rich.
All right, Tony, it's been excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.